Imagine this, a man standing beneath the soft glow of sanctuary lights every Sunday, a man whose voice seemed to carry the weight of heaven itself, a man millions trusted without hesitation because his name, Pastor Malcolm River, became synonymous with hope, power, and spiritual transformation. Yet behind those roars of applause and beneath the thunder of praise, music existed another reality, a darker, quieter world that Bishop Ardan finally exposed after years of watching the truth twist, build, and break beneath the surface in ways even those closest to Malcolm never imagined possible. While the world witnessed a polished icon whose sermons went viral within minutes, whose smile could steady an entire congregation, and whose charisma could fill arenas, Ardan said something else was happening behind the scenes, a slow shift, a dangerous transformation, a creeping shadow that began subtly, silently, through moments so small most people dismissed them without a second thought. One meeting here, one cold comment there, a stiff silence replacing warmth, and a sharp stare replacing reassurance. Yet these tiny fractures eventually built into a foundation of tension that no one dared question. Pastor Malcolm's journey from poverty to prominence had shaped him into a fighter, a survivor, a man whose ambition was carved from years of struggle, preaching to empty chairs before preaching to nations, and that ambition, once admired, slowly hardened into something else, something that made loyalty feel like a requirement and disagreement feel like betrayal. Bishop Ardan remembered the exact day he noticed the shift, a simple planning meeting, just like the hundreds before, but Malcolm walked in carrying an energy so cold and calculated that it made even veteran advisors sit straighter in their seats. His tone was sharper, his questions were laced with suspicion, and his patience was nearly non-existent. Where he once encouraged ideas, he now dismissed them with a flick of his hand. Where he once uplifted his staff, he now questioned their motives, their commitment, even their faith. People who had given their entire lives to the ministry suddenly felt like strangers in the one place they once called home. But here's the heartbreaking part. When Malcolm stepped onto the stage that same day, he transformed instantly back into the man the world adored. The church roared with excitement, strangers cried in the aisles, families held hands, and thousands believed they were witnessing pure anointing. They had no idea that backstage, minutes earlier, the man they admired had left his team trembling under the weight of words soaked in coldness, pressure, and fear. And still, the unraveling grew. Bishop Ardan said the first real crack formed during the preparation for the ministry's biggest annual event. A day thousands looked forward to, a day of lights, worship, excitement, and unity. But in the private room where only Malcolm's most trusted leaders gathered, tension hung thicker than incense. Malcolm entered quietly, his face calm but his eyes sharp with calculation. He didn't raise his voice, didn't pound the table. Instead, he began asking each person a series of unsettling questions, not about plans or logistics, but about loyalty, about commitment, about whether they truly believed in the vision he was pushing forward. Confusion washed across the room. Leaders who had sacrificed birthdays, holidays, family time, and health for the ministry suddenly found themselves on trial. It wasn't anger that frightened them. It was Malcolm's calmness, the cold steadiness in his voice, the way he dissected their words with surgical precision. Ardan said the room felt smaller, as if the air itself had tightened. Some staff members shifted uncomfortably, others lowered their eyes, and a few brave souls attempted to answer with confidence. But Malcolm reacted to every attempt with suspicion, twisting their explanations into more reasons to doubt them. It was as if he was searching for something, a weakness, a betrayal, a flaw, and no answer was good enough. And yet, the world outside remained blissfully unaware. Volunteers continued decorating hallways, choir members rehearsed harmonies, ushers greeted early arrivals with smiles, and the sanctuary filled with anticipation for the grand service. Nobody knew that inside a sealed conference room, a storm was brewing, one that would reshape the future of the ministry and reveal a side of Pastor Malcolm River that no live-stream sermon had ever shown. Ardan said that in that moment, he realized the Malcolm on stage and the Malcolm in private had become two different people entirely. The public saw a shepherd, the staff felt a ruler, the congregation saw a healer, the inner circle felt a judge. And the most terrifying part? Malcolm didn't seem to notice the shift in himself. He believed every question he asked was necessary, every interrogation justified, every cold silence a test of loyalty. His ambition had turned into armor, his charisma had turned into a mask, his leadership had turned into control, and the people who once felt protected under his guidance were now walking on glass, wondering which version of their leader they would encounter next. Bishop Ardan said he knew, in that moment, something was breaking, something sacred, something human. And as Malcolm continued questioning everyone in the room, the storm behind the curtain finally began to reveal itself, one cold word at a time. Every correction cut deeper than anyone expected, carving through the room like a blade and leaving a heaviness that no one dared name, because every challenge Malcolm delivered felt less like guidance and more like a personal attack. And every moment of silence that followed his words screamed louder than any argument they had ever heard from him. This was the exact moment people slowly realized something inside Pastor Malcolm had shifted into a place none of them recognized. Yet the shocking part, the part that broke their hearts, was that not a single person pushed back, not because they feared losing a title or position, but because they feared losing him, the man who had once prayed them through storms, sat with them through crises, celebrated their breakthroughs, and taught them how to be stronger than their circumstances. One of Malcolm's oldest advisors, a man who had been with him for more than 15 years, finally gathered enough courage to speak up, gently asking why the atmosphere had grown so tense and why the team felt so uneasy. And instead of responding with vulnerability or honesty, Malcolm flipped the question back onto him, demanding to know why the advisor felt the need to question the leader of the ministry. Before the man could even finish explaining, Malcolm cut him off, leaned forward, and asked the chilling question that froze everyone in the room. Do you still trust the vision? A question that Ardan said felt less like curiosity and more like a test with only one safe answer. What made this moment so unsettling was that this advisor had stood with Malcolm through storms that would have broken weaker men. Yet in that instant, loyalty wasn't a bond, it was a requirement, a condition, a demand. After the meeting, Ardan found the advisor sitting alone in the hallway, stunned, shaken, defeated, whispering that he had never seen such a cold and distant version of Malcolm in all the years they had walked together. And the craziest part, no one outside the ministry had the slightest clue. While those behind the scenes felt the cracks spreading quietly and dangerously, the public still saw the same charismatic, passionate pastor whose sermons sent chills through crowds and whose prayers brought strangers to tears. As weeks passed, Arden said every interaction inside the ministry felt like walking on glass, every word calculated, every suggestion weighed carefully, every expression hidden, because no one knew what might suddenly trigger Malcolm, what question might anger him, or which innocent comment might make him confront someone with unexpected intensity. Staff whispered only when the doors were shut and they were absolutely sure he wasn't near, their voices trembling with worry, but their hearts too afraid to speak out loud. And through all this, Malcolm continued preaching with the same fire and anointing the world adored, delivering messages that made thousands rise to their feet, making it almost impossible to believe that the man commanding the stage so beautifully was the same man who left his inner circle feeling small, judged, and uncertain behind closed doors. But destiny took an unexpected turn the day a tiny disagreement between two staff members reached Malcolm's ears, because instead of guiding them with patience like he always had in the past, he confronted them with a fierce coldness that Arden said felt like a storm rolling into the room. Malcolm didn't let them explain, didn't ask for details, didn't try to mediate. Instead, he questioned their character, their commitment, and their very place in the ministry. The pressure sucked the air out of the room, and even those not involved felt the impact deep in their bones, realizing that something inside Malcolm was unraveling, and whatever it was, it wouldn't stay hidden much longer. The tension didn't fade. In fact, it grew heavier with each passing day. Ardan said the following weeks felt like some of the most intense he had ever experienced in ministry. It was as if Malcolm were testing everyone around him, pushing boundaries, studying reactions, watching loyalty with an almost analytical sharpness. Even the boldest staff members, the ones who once spoke freely, now questioned themselves constantly. They wondered whether they had ever truly known the man they followed. What made this story different, Ardan said, was that no one, not one single person, could predict Malcolm's next move. One day he would praise someone publicly, calling them a pillar of the ministry, and the very next day, that same person would face a cold, merciless critique behind closed doors. A quiet fear settled into the hallways like fog, one that people felt but never named. The craziest part? Malcolm's influence wasn't weakened at all by this internal storm. People who were terrified of disappointing him still showed up every Sunday, volunteering with smiles, singing on stage, giving donations, and supporting the ministry with every ounce of energy they had. The congregation adored him. The public admired him. His online influence exploded, and no one, not a single outsider, could see the invisible disaster forming behind the scenes. For those inside, every instruction felt like stepping onto a tightrope suspended over a canyon. One wrong move could change the way Malcolm saw them forever. But here's the shocking twist. Even under this silent pressure, the ministry didn't shrink. It grew bigger. More followers, more donors, more opportunities, like a kingdom expanding even as the walls inside were crumbling. Then came the day Ardan said he would never forget, the day that revealed just how much power Malcolm held. They were discussing a major project, expanding the ministry to a new city, a dream Malcolm had spoken about for years. But what was supposed to be a simple planning meeting spiraled into one of the most intense confrontations Ardon had ever witnessed. Malcolm questioned everyone's judgment, demanded explanations for decisions made months earlier, and challenged even his most loyal advisors with a sharpness that left them speechless. He dismantled objections one by one, scrutinized every detail, rejected every alternative, and stood firm with a level of authority that bordered on ruthless precision. This, Ardon said, was the moment people finally understood the true power Malcolm commanded, not just through his sermons or influence, but through the sheer control he held over the rooms he entered, the decisions he made, and the hearts of the people who followed him. One young pastor, who had walked beside Malcolm faithfully for over a decade, reportedly left that meeting completely blindsided, realizing for the first time that the leader he had trusted with his spiritual future was no longer the same man he once promised to serve. And this, Ardon said, was only the beginning of the unraveling that would change everything. Ardon said he watched in disbelief as the young pastor tried to explain himself, only to be met with sharp surgical questions from Malcolm that cut deeper than anyone in the room expected. Questions so precise and cold that the pastor began doubting not just his decisions, but his entire sense of judgment. The tension became almost unbearable, filling the room like a suffocating fog. And this is where it gets interesting. Despite how harsh the confrontation was, despite the emotional bruises and the silent fears it created, not a single person walked away from the ministry, not even those who had been shaken. They stayed, they adapted, they learned to navigate this new unspoken rulebook that Malcolm had written through behavior rather than words, a rulebook that demanded loyalty above comfort, obedience above opinions, and silence above doubt. It was a delicate and dangerous balance between devotion and fear, and every single person inside the ministry felt the weight of that invisible pressure. But destiny took an unexpected turn when what started as a minor disagreement suddenly escalated into a deeper revelation about Malcolm's leadership. Ardon explained that during one intense discussion, a hidden conflict surfaced, an undercurrent of resentment and tension that had been building for months, showing that Malcolm's decisions had affected people in ways no one truly understood, pushing careers into uncertainty, testing reputations, and straining personal relationships quietly and relentlessly. Yet even during these internal storms, Malcolm maintained the same calm, captivating public persona that people adored. The outside world still saw the inspiring pastor who moved crowds to tears, never suspecting that behind the curtain, everything was shifting. The duality of his personality, Ardon said, was both fascinating and frightening, a paradox of brilliance and mercilessness. By the end of those harrowing weeks, the ministry staff had learned to expect the unexpected. Everyone walked on eggshells, carrying out their duties with commitment, while silently wondering how Malcolm might react to even the simplest question. The craziest part was how everyone adapted. They gave their best, served faithfully, smiled through the pressure, all while dealing with hidden conflicts and a leadership style that was slowly wearing them down. The tension inside the ministry was rising, and everyone sensed that the story had not yet reached its climax. Something bigger was coming, something that would change their entire understanding of the man they followed. As time passed, the pressure pushed toward its breaking point. Bishop Ardon said the final twist came when a personal choice, made by Pastor Malcolm, began affecting not just the staff, but even his closest friends and family. And you won't believe what unfolded next. A decision that seemed small at first grew into a ripple of consequences that no one expected, creating whispers in every corner of the ministry, whispers that questioned not just Malcolm's leadership, but the very foundation of trust that had taken years to build. And this is where it gets interesting. Even those who had been closest to Malcolm from the beginning suddenly realized they did not know him as well as they thought. A private meeting pushed everything to the edge. Malcolm called a select group of advisors together to discuss a sensitive matter regarding the ministry's future, and although the meeting appeared routine on the outside, inside the room tension swirled like a storm about to break. Every word Malcolm spoke carried weight. Every look he gave felt like a silent test of loyalty, and those present felt a chilling mix of confusion and fear. Even the advisors who had survived countless challenges felt unprepared for what Malcolm demanded next, because his questions were no longer about operations. They were about character, commitment, and unshakable loyalty. People left the room shaken, unsure where they now stood in his eyes. What made this story different, Ardon said, was Malcolm's terrifying ability to balance ruthlessness behind closed doors with charm in public. While he demanded perfection and obedience privately, the public saw only a larger-than-life pastor who brought crowds to tears. Destiny twisted again when one staff member, nearly crushed by months of pressure, finally spoke up, hoping for understanding, but Malcolm responded with merciless precision, dismantling every objection, every point, every plea, leaving the staff member questioning their competence, their loyalty, and even their purpose. Yet despite that painful confrontation, most of the team still chose to stay loyal, a testament to the complex hold Malcolm had over their hearts and minds. Ardan revealed the personal toll behind these scenes. Friendships shattered, trust eroded, alliances fractured by moments the public would never see. And yet every Sunday, the world cheered for him, inspired by the man they saw on stage. But here is the most shocking part. Those closest to him carried invisible scars, navigating a landscape ruled by ambition, loyalty, and control. This was the side of leadership no one in the outside world talked about, the merciless human side that shaped the ministry as much as the sermons, best-selling books, and viral messages ever did. In the end, Arden left viewers with a haunting question that lingered long after the story ended. How do we celebrate greatness while acknowledging the cost? How do we reconcile the inspiration someone gives with the hidden flaws they carry? You won't believe how thin the line becomes between brilliance and ruthlessness. Pastor Malcolm Rivers' story was a reminder that even legends bleed, even visionaries stumble, and even the most powerful figures can leave behind shadows deeper than anyone outside the circle will ever understand. The unseen struggles, the hidden battles, the quiet collapses behind the scenes, these are the moments that define legacies, shape destinies, and leave unforgettable marks on the people who witness them from the inside.